Let's turn to the White House now, where an absolutely wild cascade of statements from President Donald Trump came during his meeting with Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who was in town last week meeting with Donald Trump. And Trump rolled out an absolutely shocking announcement. Actually, it was surprising even to his own White House. Just before we roll this clip, friend of the show, Philip Wegman, reported in Real Clear Politics, quote, after Trump made his announcement, even some senior administration officials were surprised and still looking for answers. Quote, that was interesting, one told Real Clear Politics after the press conference wrapped. Asked what the plan would look like in practice, the official replied, quote, I need to get clarity myself. Ryan.
Yeah, and so Trump in his press conference said that this is not a decision he came to lightly. This is the result of great and extraordinary deliberation, which is undercut by the idea that it came as a surprise to senior administration officials, and even seemed to take Netanyahu a little bit by surprise. Like, it's not clear how much of this came up in their conversation, because, and we're about to play you some clips from their little tete-a-tete before the meeting, during which Netanyahu cannot wipe the smile off of his face. You'll notice that in the clips. And then their stand-up press conference afterwards, during which Netanyahu looks a little bit shell-shocked after getting news that he appeared not to have expected and doesn't quite, I think, know how to internalize or make of. Itamar Ben-Gvir, the super far-right guy who's abandoning Netanyahu over striking a ceasefire deal, tweeted, Donald, we're going to have a wonderful relationship. Like, this is a guy who was himself, like, what, a convicted terrorist in Israel, and has always wanted to ethnically cleanse Gaza, and he now sees Trump in his reflection. But so let's roll a little bit of this and then try to unpack how serious he is and what the implications would be.
The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't.
He's demanding a Palestinian state?
No, they're not. No.
Are they demanding a path towards a Palestinian state or any other recognition
Everybody's
of that
demanding one thing. You know what it is? Peace. We want peace. We want people to stop being killed. But everybody's demanding one thing. Very simple, peace. And he wants peace also.
So reporters had a lot of questions about that announcement that we were going to take over Gaza. Among them was, will this involve U.S. boots on the ground? And Trump said, if that's what it requires, then it will require. They also asked, because there obviously is enormous amounts of reconstruction and demolition work and removal of unexploded ordnance that needs to happen there. And so there does need to be some displacement, either internally or externally, in the course of doing that. And so Trump was asked, okay, you're taking over Gaza. How many Palestinians do you expect will be removed from Gaza? Here's what he said.
How many people are you thinking about?
All of them. I mean, we're talking about probably 1.7 million people, 1.7 million, maybe 1.8 million, but I think all of them.
So all of them. And notice there, and a lot of people have picked up on this is not the first time that he has flagged Gaza's current population at about 1.7 million. It was 2.3 million when it started. The public figures are that just over 60,000 were killed in the conflict. What we know about conflict is that there are usually 4 to 5 what they call indirect deaths for every direct killing in a conflict. And the indirect deaths, you can just use your imagination. These are people who die from treatable diseases, die of malnutrition, die of dysentery, or something falls on them. Then they die an accidental death. in a way that they would not have if they were not living in a war zone. So 60,000 times 4 to 5, you can imagine that, okay, so now the U.S. is starting to admit that actually several hundreds of thousands of people were killed here. But then the final question, and then let's analyze this for a bit, is, well, would the Palestinians be able to return in this, let's say, fantasy scenario where somehow Trump manages to remove all 1.7 million people, which we'll talk about how fantastical that idea is, but would they be able to return? Here's Trump.
Would Palestinians have the right to return to Gaza if they left while the rebuilding was happening?
It would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places on earth. And right now, I've seen every picture from every angle, better than if I were there. And nobody can live there. You can't live there. It's too dangerous for people. Nobody can go there. It's too dangerous. Nobody wants to be there. Warriors don't want to be there. Soldiers don't want to be there. How can you have people go back? You're saying go back into Gaza now? The same thing's going to happen. It'll only be death. The best way to do it is you go out and you get beautiful, open areas with the sunlight coming through, and you build something nice. And they are not going to want to. They are not going to want to go back to Gaza.
So the second half of that clip there was actually in response to a different question, which was, would you support Jewish settlements in Gaza? And which is what Ben Gvir and Smotrich and this kind of faction of settlers are pushing for. And he was saying it's too dangerous for them too. He's like, I'm not saying it's only too dangerous for Palestinians, it's also too dangerous. So at least he's being consistent there. Now the line he said where, I want to make it so beautiful that they don't want to return, has been bouncing around my head because I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. And I think I finally unlocked it. I think he means they're going to make whatever refugee camp they send them to so beautiful and so amazing and so wonderful.
Well, he said they're going to have beautiful houses.
Beautiful houses.
Yeah.
That they won't want to leave that area. So he's not saying we're going to make Gaza so amazing they won't want to come back, which makes no sense because if Gaza's amazing, forget the heritage and everything else. If it's amazing, he'd want to come back. But he's saying that wherever they send them. So there are layers of this going on here. And the kind of first one that we have to confront with Trump always is, how serious is this on the complete, total nonsense bluff spectrum to deadly serious plan that he's going to execute on? Where are you on this, on the Trump spectrum there?
Well, I mean, I think you absolutely have to take him seriously because he's speaking as though, on the one hand, this is a fully fleshed out plan, right? He's saying he had answers to all of these particular questions. There are things that he
Except not where they're going to go.
Well, he's
Right.
so, but that hinges on what he's saying is an agreement in the works with other Arab nations, which is already dead on arrival because Saudi Arabia has said no. The sovereign wealth fund that was announced in the last 48 hours, I suppose, is potentially aimed at something like this.
You buy
seems like
TikTok and redevelop Gaza, I see.
right, yeah. It seems like it was something that was cobbled together in the last 48 hours, maybe with input from Jared Kushner, as Tara Palmieri is reporting that, you know, we covered this at the time. It didn't get a lot of pickup, but Kushner had something to the extent. This was last year that Gaza could be developed, that it was like an amazing opportunity
seaside,
for real estate developers. Yeah, exactly. Riviera. So, go ahead.
The Jordan and Egypt points are worth pausing on for a second because Trump seems to be, so Trump is saying, and he's going to meet soon with the King of Jordan. He talks, you know, he can get as he calls him, the general in Egypt, Sisi, and get him on the phone whenever he wants. Trump is saying that he compared them to Mexico and Canada.
Yeah.
He's like, Mexico and Canada said they weren't going to do anything about their border, and then I threatened tariffs, and boom, all of a sudden they're doing something about their border. Couple things there. Mexico and Canada never said they wouldn't do anything about their border. It was a fairly easy, oh, you want to send 10,000 National Guard to our border and you'll back off these tariff threats? Okay, fine, we will do that. That's a different concession than something that both Sisi and the royal family in Jordan believe would lead to their toppling. So think about this. They're much smaller countries than we are, and you're asking them to take 1 million people each. And these 1 million people are more affiliated politically with Muslim Brotherhood factions, which the Hashemites in Jordan and the military in Egypt have done everything they can to suppress. So now you're empowering them and destabilizing your country. So you're asking these rulers with threats of whatever economic, threats that Trump is going to make on the one hand, and carrots on the other. We'll pay this, we'll do this, we'll give you all this money from the World Bank, the IMF, and we'll build this. What does that mean to a ruler who thinks that the end result of accepting the deal is that within some period of time, they will be overthrown, they will be out of power? Mm-hmm. Rulers are willing to take deals that are harmful to their populations if they think it's going to extend their power. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just basic kind of power politics. So Trump thinks they're just being stubborn and that he can cajole them, but it is existential for them.
Well, and they actually also know, and this is worth pausing on, it's maybe one of the most obvious points here, the reason that Trump is asking the question, why would you want to go back? It's a place of death and destruction. Well, they know that. They have known that for decades, and they have not left. The whole point is the land. The entire fight is over the specific piece of land. So to say why would they want to go back? I mean, this is the question that they have been answering definitively for decades. So in the pragmatic terms of what Donald Trump thinks will actually happen here, when you have Tony Blinken saying just less than a month ago, that 3/4 of the Hamas fighters have already been replaced. They've already replaced 3/4 of the people that Hamas has lost. You have a population that is clinging to the land and has been for years, for generations, over and over again, and a militant government. That's U.S. troops on the ground. Mm-hmm. There's no other way to put it. The other Arab countries wouldn't be able to just peel the population of Gaza away from Gaza without violence. There's absolutely no way that this happens without incredible violence. And likely, if Donald Trump says we, quote, own the Gaza Strip, if he says the U.S. is just going to come in and take ownership and he thinks he can make a deal, this will be U.S. troops. This would be kids from the Midwest, from everywhere, boots on the ground in Gaza, peeling people away from the land that they've spilled generations of blood to stay on.
Yes, and also, right. And so they're actually, if they wanted to rebuild Gaza, like there are hundreds of thousands of residences that are still habitable. Like the entire thing is not uninhabitable. But let's say you do need 1 million people to go somewhere else. You could find some housing internally within Gaza for some portion of those. But there is another country that is right there that could take people for the time period. And that country's name is Israel. And that country also happens to be the one that made it uninhabitable. So if they're serious here about that, like, they could do that. And there's a step toward peace and coexistence. But I think it's worth underscoring a valid point that Trump makes, and that is the absolute level of destruction. And Witkoff talked about this as well outside the White House. So and you can see the real estate developer in him as he's talking about this. So let's roll A2 here. And then I want to skip ahead on something. Go ahead.
When the president talks about cleaning it out, he talks about making it habitable. And this is a long-range plan. They've dug tunnels underneath there that have basically degraded the stone that would form foundations. We have to examine that. You do it with borings. You do it with subterranean surveys.
How long could that take?
And this guy knows real estate.
It's years on top of years.
Right.
The disposal effort in Gaza is, we estimate, 3 to 5 years just to dispose of all the things before you can look down beneath the surface of the soil, and then before you get a master plan done. And the president is intent on getting it all done correctly. So to me, it is unfair to have explained to Palestinians that they might be back in 5 years. That's just preposterous.
And he's just taking a common sense approach.
said he would work on extending.
So a few months ago, I spoke to a UN official whose job it was to do ordnance removal after the 2014 war in Gaza, and what he described. First of all, there are not a whole lot of people able to do this in the world. Like there's small teams, it's specialized work. Second of all, he described it as painstakingly laborious stuff. So in general, as he was describing it to me, and I've since been able to confirm this with others, the munitions that Israel uses, oftentimes 5 to 10% of those, under the best of circumstances, do not explode upon impact. They are not operating in the best of circumstances. They're operating in this dense urban environment, which means you're going to have a much higher failure rate, which means you're going to have unexploded ordnance everywhere around Gaza. Because if the numbers are absolutely breathtaking when it comes to the amount of metric tons that have been dropped on Gaza. And so if you take 10 to 20% of that and assume that that is unexploded, like that's the task. And he said that these are actually much more stable than you would think. That probably wouldn't give me a whole lot of comfort if it was in my own courtyard or in my bedroom. He said, for instance, they pulled one out of a kitchen. Like it came to the roof, second floor, through the kitchen floor. And just getting that one single unexploded bomb out of that kitchen took them weeks, because first you got to clear the door out, and you have to do all this gently, because while they are stable, they become destabilized if a bulldozer hits them or something else significant. And so one of our correspondents in Gaza, Abu Bakr Abed, who's been on this program a bunch of times, so yesterday he tried to get to Gaza City, couldn't get a ride, ended up. He's posted a bunch on his Twitter feed. You can see this. He ended up walking. It took him like 3.5 hours to walk to Gaza City. And we can roll A4 here just to get a sense of the destruction. And at the end of this clip, he stumbles on an unexploded mine, just to underline Trump's point that this is an extraordinarily dangerous situation. So let's play A4 here.
Here we are. It's just 7 in the morning here in Gaza City, where all you can see is just total destruction. Here are some buildings that have been destroyed during the genocide. So I think I've found a mine. Yeah, so I'm gonna walk away. I'm afraid it might explode. Oh my God, what this sound is.
And we often get questions, by the way, about Abu Bakr's British accent.
Yes.
He was before October 7th, his passion was doing journalism around football, European football. And so he picked up his British accent. He's never left Gaza in his life. Picked up a British accent watching British footballers.
Yeah.
But so you see there, he's just stumbling along and, oh, there's a mine. Like that does have to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And I had the sense throughout this that Israel knew that part of the carpet bombing of the entire thing of Gaza was to make it uninhabitable, was to produce a reality that left you only bad options for the Palestinians. And one of them being, all right, what a shame, love to have you stay, but now it's completely uninhabitable, you're gonna have to leave. But like I said, if he was serious, there is a plan where 500,000 to 1 million people can stay, another 100,000 get relocated inside Gaza. Those are the workers who are involved in this reconstruction. Like it's ridiculous. What's Trump's idea? He's going to kick all the Palestinians out and then bring like Indian or Thai construction workers in? Like that doesn't make any sense. You've got people who could do the work. And then you could have the others internally displaced in the Negev Desert or elsewhere in settlement camps, and with a promise that they're going to return when it's done.
Yes.
And that promise backed up by the prospect of a path towards statehood and normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel.
Right.
So all of that is pushing in the same direction. Instead, instead of Trump getting a Saudi-Israel peace deal, in this path, he's more likely to see the Egyptian and Jordanian ones unravel. Like they will stop recognizing Israel if they keep pushing this.
That's a great point, because this plan is, I think, on the one hand, hyper pragmatic and not pragmatic at all. Like that's the tension between this. On the one hand, he's saying, he's making this very obvious point that everyone dances around, which is, okay, if this is a ceasefire, we're about to repeat a tragic cycle. He's making that point. Everyone dances around it, but on the one hand, that's absolutely true, and it's from the sort of pragmatic lens of a non-ideologue. And so he made that point. On the other hand, the idea of peeling people off the land that they fought generations to keep, there's nothing pragmatic about it unless you're willing to actually do a significant Iraq-style nation-building operation in the Gaza Strip, which is about the size of Las Vegas. If you want to go and do that and then have the U.S. own a strip of land in the Middle East that is sacred to many, many people, you're asking for, again, generational nation building. And so it's exploded all of these typical, I guess, fault lines of what MAGA means to the Republican Party, but beyond that, what MAGA actually means like to the American people, to the people who voted for Donald Trump. Is it about this sort of expansionism, imperialism, or is it about actually like quote unquote America first? Josh Hawley right away told the New York Times, I don't think it's the best use of US resources to spend a bunch of money in Gaza. I'd prefer that to be spent in the United States first.
That's the logic of MAGA.
So maybe...
Which rose out of the ashes of the Iraq occupation.
Exactly. I mean, what about all of the tunnels? Let's just take the point that you hear from Netanyahu like, what does it look like if Hamas says you are not taking us?
And if you tell them they're not coming back, right? If you tell them right out front, okay, we're kicking you out and you're never coming back, then of course they're going to fight you.
Yeah, but this brings us to your original point, which is how serious is what Donald Trump laid out yesterday. And my impression is that this is something he's thought about for a while with Kushner. They've kicked around the sort of like galaxy brain.
Real estate brain.
Right, yeah, it's sort of been kicked around. And then just in the last few days, they decided, oh, Netanyahu's coming. We can like actually really do this. Let's see what we can actually put together. Because again, like actual people in the White House, senior officials were caught off guard by this. That much is very clear. So whether this is a starting point, tariff style, 25% tariff style, or 100% tariff style starting point is unclear. But Ryan, it's the same thing with the tariffs. I think he should be taken seriously because he's not, he is not an ideologue. He's not ideologically committed to one outcome or the other.
Yeah.
So when he does these negotiations, he could kind of land wherever he thinks it works for him.
And confusing the situation further, he's now talking, as of this morning, his most explicitly about reaching a deal that he will celebrate with Iran, which obviously cannot happen if he engages in full-on ethnic cleansing in Gaza. So let's put up A3 here, where he's talking about the role that Iran negotiations play here.
It's Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani.
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do, not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left. And they shouldn't be able to do it. And Biden should have said that, but he never did. I don't know why, lack of intelligence, perhaps. But he never said it. If that happens to a leader, or close to a leader, frankly, if you had other people involved also, you would call for total obliteration of a state that did it. That would include Iran.
So that's the shot here. So here's the chaser, and we can maybe add this in post on Truth Social this morning. Trump says this, quote, "I want Iran to be a great and successful country, but one that cannot have a nuclear weapon. Reports that the United States, working in conjunction with Israel, is going to blow Iran into smithereens, all caps, are greatly exaggerated." In other words, he's referring to his own comments.
The entire bluff, yeah.
I would much prefer a verified nuclear peace agreement, and this is all caps, so that's VNPA, which will let Iran peacefully grow and prosper. We should start working on it immediately and have a big Middle East celebration, celebrations capitalized, when it is signed and completed. God bless the Middle East. And so here you have Trump, who has hired an enormous number of people who want to reach a peace deal with Iran and get back into the nuclear deal that Obama struck, that Trump ripped up in his first term. Here you have him the most explicitly stating it outright that is a goal of his. And it comes after he threatened to obliterate them, basically if they kill him, which, fair, right? You know, it's like, look, you kill me, I've left instructions that you're dead too.
Yeah, it's a hell of a bluff. But it all came on the heels of this New York Times report on Monday that because of all of the insanity going on, sort of ended up being buried in the news cycle. The Times reported, quote, new intelligence about Iran's nuclear program has convinced American officials that a secret team of the country's scientists is exploring a faster, if cruder, approach to developing atomic weapon if Tehran's leadership decides to race for a bomb, according to current and former American officials. Now, if you are like many people, vague New York Times reporting about nuclear program sends a chill up your spine because you just don't know if you can trust it. But they are saying essentially the timeline could be severely minimized or significantly minimized based on these new efforts down to something like a month if Iran wanted to enrich uranium and have a crude nuclear weapon. So Trump is then asked, in this context, that was the broader thing that was happening when he gets these questions from Peter Doocy.
And scientifically or practically, whether that's true, we don't know, but strategically, we can see the internal logic. The deterrent that Iran had up until recently was its massive, sprawl of proxies throughout the region that could threaten Israel and threaten, U.S. forces in Iraq or Syria if Iran was attacked. Plus, it's what they believe to be sophisticated air defenses. Israel apparently massively degraded their air defenses with that counterstrike, leaving them significantly exposed to future strikes, and their own proxies are significantly degraded. Hezbollah in particular, as well as Hamas. The Houthis are still, very much capable of firing, missiles out of their mountains, and that will be the case for the foreseeable future, no matter what Trump wants to do about it. So with those kind of those protections, so to speak, kind of beaten down, strategically you can understand why they say, okay, well, all we have left then is a race towards a nuclear weapon. Because they look around and they're like, who's not around? Like, oh, Gaddafi. Gaddafi struck a nuclear deal. Not long after that, he was ousted. Who is around? Kim Jong-un. He's around, and for no other reason than he has a nuclear weapon. So you can understand the logic, at least, even if we don't necessarily have to believe the precise contours of the reporting.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine Gaddafi with a nuclear weapon, and
what you'd be imagining is a man who's going to die of natural causes.
Yeah,
not.
That's right. So before we wrap this up, it's also absolutely important to note that Trump was asked about, quote, Judea.
And by the way, Libya would be so much better off than it is now.
The real Middle Eastern Riviera, as Trump is now saying Gaza will be.
But Libya is just completely destroyed by the U.S. and NATO, absolutely ravaged.
Well, on that point, though, we have to mention that Trump was asked about, quote, Judea and Samaria, about his ideological disposition, what he believes, if he believes that Judea and Samaria, that Israel has a biblical right to them. And we can put this VO up on the screen here. This is from the West Bank. Trump essentially, this is A5, Trump essentially was saying, well, we're going to make a big announcement about that in the weeks ahead. So Ryan, as the West Bank,
4 weeks or something, he said he'd
3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So as the West Bank is now, these are startling images. If you're listening to it, you're seeing, familiar. This is Gaza, but before you were seeing the familiar sort of skyline of the West Bank with all kinds of explosions. That is huge and gets another one of those things that keeps getting buried in these news cycles. But in a matter of weeks, we could have some announcement that Trump also wants to do something significant, major with the West Bank.
Yeah, he's saying he'll decide whether or not he's going to allow Israel to annex the West Bank, which, again, you're not getting a peace deal. You're not getting a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia. You're not getting a deal with Iran. You might lose your deals that you already have with Egypt and Jordan if you do that. But Sheldon Adelson's widow, Miriam,
had a great day yesterday.
$100+ million and asked him in return to allow for the annexation of the West Bank. Like that's, as shocking as it is to say, that's a thing that happened in 2024 and 2025, and so he may give it to them. And as an update, my colleague at Dropsite News, Jeremy Scahill, has an official statement from Bassem Naim, a spokesperson for Hamas, in response to Trump's claim. He says the U.S. plan to seize Gaza and remove the Palestinians, quote, is a crime against humanity and a reinforcement of the law of the jungle at the international level. He goes on to say, the problem of reconstruction is not in the presence of the Palestinian people on their land, but rather in the continuation of the Zionist occupation and the stifling siege of the Gaza Strip for more than 17 years with American support, unquote. Naim called for, quote, urgent regional and international action to put an end to these malicious plans. Scahill writes, as reports emerge that Netanyahu intends to sabotage future phases of the ceasefire deal, Naim reiterated Hamas's position that it intends to abide by the terms. Quote, we demand that the mediators, especially the United States, oblige the occupation to implement the ceasefire agreement in its 3 stages without procrastination or manipulation. We are committed to implementing the agreement as long as the occupation commits to it, and any manipulation in implementing the agreement may cause it to collapse. So interesting statement from Hamas, because there are some people who think that Trump's bluffing here to just make sure that the agreement actually does continue to be implemented. We'll see.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.